so much, everyone, for coming. I know we still got a couple people coming in, but thank you so much for coming. Um, every time we do one of these, the community supports us greatly. We don't take that for granted, so thank you. Thank you so much for coming, for always supporting us, for asking us about the next Cap Talk and the next Cap Talk, like what are we going to talk about next? And so we appreciate that the community sees us as a vehicle in this way to address issues and find solutions for those issues as well. Because it's one thing to talk about some of these things, that's another thing to then take the next step and go move towards solutions. And this particular topic this month is one of great proportions. Myself, Bishop, and the rest of us, it goes without saying. We just went through an election. We're seeing the fruits of that election right now. Agency after, whether it's a nonprofit, whether it's governmental agencies, so on and so forth. We're going through a lot of change, to put it nicely. And so, but before we get into that, I'd like to, the Bishop, if you could start us off with a prayer, I'd appreciate it. You don't need to know the introduction. Bishop Hurley-Cole.
Sometimes people wonder why we pray so much. Most of our events and our gatherings, we begin to pray. I just want to encourage you to know that this is not something new. It's always been a necessity and a desire. People who really want to know where to go, to seek wisdom and guidance from some insight, some power, some authority that's greater than themselves. And that's why we pray. Let's do that now. Gracious God and Father, we're thankful that before any of us were born, before any of our parents were born, that you who are timeless and omniscient, who knows everything, who has seen everything, already knew about this day. You knew that we would be here. You knew that our experiences would bring us to a point where we would have things that we had questions about, things that we were sure of, things that we needed to do. So we pray for your guidance and for your wisdom. Pray in this moment that the wisdom of the ages accompanies us as we go into these next years, these next months, these next days, and even the next hour. We pray that you would give us the serenity of knowing that you are in charge, and ultimately all things will work out together for good, especially if we do our work. So we pray for guidance, we pray for strength, we pray for unity and purpose. We pray this in the name of He who loves us the most, Jesus our Christ. Amen.
Thank you so much, Bishop. So I won't dance around it. I'll just jump right into it. We had an election. We elected a president that many of us may or may not have wanted. And the result of that election is what we're seeing these last, what we call the first 100 days. We're a little bit beyond the first 100, but we frame this in this way for a reason. In the first 100 days, what have we seen? And if you got a handout, we handed out, a paper that kind of has some things on it that would kind of prime this conversation. And so if you look within the first 100 days of the Trump administration, we've seen a lot of cuts, a lot of hard, deep cuts. If you look in education, Title I funding, in trouble. Special education funding, in trouble. Reducing access to support services in that realm. Head Start, early education, threat. Low-income families are predominantly affected by that. And ultimately, the proposed dismantling of the Department of Education, which is a monumental thing that me personally can't even fathom. I don't even know what that looks like, and I'm scared to find out. And I'm sure many of you are, because if you don't know, there are a lot of things that are tied to the Department of Education, which starts with special education, but it doesn't end there. It's so many things that would encompass us losing the Department of Education. And there's so many other things in education going on up to higher education, a lot of funding at that level, HBCUs, so on and so forth. But going to healthcare, Medicaid in particular, the threatening of taking away Medicaid. Medicaid cuts could impact up to 750,000 Michiganders. Monumental. Local health care providers like Covenant and others. Me personally, I work for Great Lakes Bay Health. Huge concern. Huge concern. Nursing homes, and not only in the city, but in rural areas as well. Like this, what we're talking about, this doesn't just affect 48601. It covers the whole state of Michigan, it covers the whole country. When you talk about the things that are being cut in healthcare, social services, freezes on federal grants, threatened services like Meals on Wheels. We're in a building, the Saginaw CAC, that depends on federal funding. And their funding is in jeopardy. That can't be understated. The CAC has been a bedrock of this community for over 60 years. We can't lose a CAC. Now going on into environmental concerns. Great Lakes Observing System funding at risk. That impacts lake management. The people that clean our beautiful parks in this state and in this region, that's under attack. Environmental protections, the EPA, a lot of what we do with Saginaw CAP is connected to the EPA. It's connected to environmental organizations. All of us are worried. All of us are worried. Everything is in peril. Food assistance, again, right here at CAC. And you take a look around, they've revamped this place because of federal funding. Now federal funding is coming under attack. Again, I can't stress enough how important a CAC is to not only Saginaw City, but this whole county. Cancellation of $500 million in USDA food shipments. Again, this building, it's like I'm reading the script of CAC. The services that they provide in this building are in peril. Can't say it enough. And other local food pantries and assistance programs strain. I can go down the list of, you all know the different agencies that help people with food assistance in this community. All of them depend on federal funding, whether it's the soup kitchen. I can go down the list of all of the agencies that depend on, federal funding and pass-through funding, because sometimes, the verbiage gets, mixed up sometimes. You think it's state funding, but it's actually federal funding. It's pass-through funding. It comes through the state, then comes to Saginaw. So it's a very layered conversation about funding that's in peril. And, of course, the Social Security office was threatened to close. We were able to lobby our representative in DC. We were able to fight to keep that building open, but that's one win. We need a few more. Actually, need a lot more. And, the conversation could go on, but we wanted to have this conversation with you all to, number one, talk about, how have you been affected by it? Maybe an agency or an entity that I didn't mention. That, pretty much the floor is open. If anybody is is, how are you feeling in this moment? All these cuts are happening. All of this uncertainty is happening. How are you feeling? What's going on with you all? Does anybody want to speak to that at all?
My name is Kathy Shaw, and I work with A&D Home Health Care, the waiver program. And the program the services that we provide to the community is nursing home services in their homes. And a lot of them Medicaid pays for. So I get a lot of questions from our clients. They're kind of worried about Medicaid. We help them with their Medicaid application. We help them with their food stamps application. So it's kind of scary for a lot of our clients.
Thank you so much for that. As you can see, that was just something I didn't even think about. But you got a lot of our seniors that are at home, that depend on, something that's funded by the federal government. Medicaid is something that has been a staple. People work for a number of years, and then, they're able to retire, and Medicare helps them through retirement, those golden years. And it's kind of their safety net. They don't have to worry about whether they can go to their doctor, or whether they can get transportation to the doctor, or other services that are connected to Medicaid. And even, end-of-life services. A lot of that stuff is covered by Medicaid as well, that we don't think of. Earlier, you had it. I saw a hand up there.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Hurley Coleman, Executive Director here at Saginaw County CAC, and I wanted to just bring light to some of the things that Jeff Bowles had just mentioned in terms of funding. You all know that our agency here, majority of our funding comes from the federal and the state government dollars. When I've been here in year 4, this is my 5th year being the Executive Director, and I've been saying for 4 years that we need to diversify our funding mix so that in the event that the federal government stops, funding will be okay. But yet, we have not been able to diversify to the point that if we were to lose our federal dollars, we would be okay. That's not the case. It takes a while to do that. But also, you need the community to give, to donate, and then you need the community to help you write grants, do grant writing, but you have to have capacity, which means you have to have additional funding that's not mixed into federal dollars, because you can't use federal dollars to fundraise. So you gotta have money on the outside, which means you really need the community and you need the businesses to help out. See, so if the businesses don't help organizations like ours with funding, large amounts, then you can't survive. So I'm just gonna give you what's happened in the first 100 days since I've been here, since Trump has taken over. I'm not gonna list the programs except for CSBG, which he mentioned. Community Service Block Grant. There's 1,300 community action agencies across the country. There's 27 of them in the state of Michigan. In our area, there's about 3 or 4 of them in the mid-Michigan area between Flint, Saginaw, Clare, Isabella, Bay County, Midland. There's 3 different agencies. But just here alone in Saginaw, I have 3 programs that have been cut with funding. One program, $125,000. Program number 2, $62,000. Program number 3, $45,000. Those are their staff that are attached to those programs, which means there's families that won't be able to take home pay. They won't be able to feed. And there's services like rent, mortgage assistance, property tax assistance. You have monies like emergency assistance for homeless people who have been shut out. We used to do hotel stays. People, you lose their house due to fire. We do hotel weekend stays. We do a whole week stay. We don't have it anymore. Matter of fact, Saginaw County doesn't have it anymore. So those are programs that are gone since President Trump took over. So that amounts to $232,000 in 100 days. $232,000. Now this is the other big thing. Community Service Block Grant. If we lose Community Service Block Grant across the board for every community action agency, for us, based on our population size and based on the amount of people in poverty, which is about 18%, they calculate an allocation. And our allocation for Saginaw County is about $608,000. If you take $608,000 out of the federal budget for us, we will be closed. So all this beautiful work that you see going on, it'll be stopped. And unless we go and tell Senator Gary Peters, we tell Senator Melissa Slotkin that after the representatives voted to the floor, we have enough Republicans to vote it down, and then we have senators, and it goes past the Republicans, representatives, and gets to the Senate floor, the senators have to vote it down. There have to be enough Republicans to vote against it, because right now in both chambers, we're outweighed. So this means that the people who are supporting CSVG, they have to have enough people to fight against it. So if we don't start talking about it now, all the community action agencies will lose all their funding. And the majority of them are just like me, where their funding mix is more majority federal and state dollars. And so there will be millions of people around the country who, when they pick up the phone to give somebody help to pay the bill, it won't be there. Or they will reallocate the money in a different department, and who knows if it's going to be the same.
Thank you so much, Earl. As you can see, it's heavy and it's real. Like during the campaign season, people talked about, man, he might do this, he might. Well, we're at the point where he is doing these things. It's not a thought in his mind anymore. It's being put into action. And so, what do we do? Did you raise your hand?
Really actually touched on some of the things that I wanted to bring about it. I do work with organizations who do have federal funding coming into them, like Saginaw County Prevention Coalition, as well as the Health Organization. My main job, fortunately for me, is not funded through federal funding. However, I do work for a police department, so those funds we need the police department to help us to generate. But my concern is, as you stated, housing. Section 8, federal affordable housing a lot of that is funded through government and federal funding. And right now we are facing a crisis where a lot of our community is facing homelessness. And we are all, no matter what we do in life and how we're working, things like that, we're all just really a step away from being in that position ourselves. So it kind of makes me wonder where that leaves us as a community and those people. If we were to lose funding, a lot of people will be on the streets, and that includes the majority of children, because the people who receive those funding is because they have children, most likely. Back in 2019, a lot of the grants lost in those grants. It was written out of those grants that we were able to provide funding in forms of food when it came to our young people. And we know that, we can say what it is and we can assume what it is, but we know that a lot of children don't get to get those meals at home. They're not receiving those meals, whether that household is receiving food stamps or being able to get out into places like CAC and some of the local churches and some of the other local organizations that provide things such as that food. So it kind of just makes me wonder as a community where that leaves us if we do lose out on those fundings. And we already know, what he's talking about when it comes to the educational system. The education schools are a great source of food when it comes to our young people. That's where a lot of them are getting their meals from. So it just kind of, leaves me wondering, what the mindset is when it comes to our community in those situations, such as food and housing.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you named off a number of things that are affected by federal funding, housing. We already have a housing crisis. We already have a homelessness crisis. We already have a lot of people out here that are homeless because of mental illness. Well, guess what? Mental illness funding, federal. You can go on and on. But that's the reason why we wanted to talk about this. Because I think And talking about it together, we can kind of point out some things. Like some of y'all already pointed out some things that I haven't even thought about. And I think that's the strength of having this conversation.
I just wanted to quickly add that in the last 10 years, it's estimated that between 40 and 60% of prenatal care and childbirth was under Medicaid, and those are currently facing cuts right now.
Absolutely. Yet another thing, specific to this community. Saginaw Cat, we talked about, prenatal, the lack of prenatal care. That's specific to Black women. Black women have the lowest birth rates. And a lot of that is because of, cuts to Medicaid. This hasn't been the only time that it's been cut, or federal funding has been cut. It's just another instance where we're taking another hit. And so, does anybody else have anything maybe that hasn't been mentioned so far that we haven't touched upon as far as funding? Hey, you threw you under the bus.
I'm not quite sure what hasn't been touched on already. But I guess it's just sort of kind of piggyback on what has been said. I'm the president and CEO of the Protection Council, and it is an organization that provides housing and support services for youth and young adults, not just in Saginaw County, but in 3 other counties. The only organization that provides housing and support services for young adults in those 4 counties. Again, like Mr. Curley said, a lot of our funding is federal dollars, either directly or indirectly. And in the first 100 days, there have been several of our programs impacted by funding cuts, or just the uncertainty of funding cuts. So.
Another program that addresses a specific young people or young adults that are trying to transition into adulthood that may have some issues doing so. An agency like hers provides some stability for them to be able to do that. To have that in peril is very troublesome, but it's like everything else we talked about, very troublesome. It's a tough conversation to have.
We don't want to mention this too, that a lot of people who maybe were supporting the agenda that is currently in administration, because I don't like talking about the current administration, but I just want to point out that there are certain peoples and subsets of the population who did try to support the president's initiative. Well, with the loss of funding, our pipe fitters, our contractors, our landlords, homeowners who have properties, our electrical companies, like consumers or propane companies, our municipalities who receive dollars from entities, everybody that works within the small business population, who somehow may have gotten a contract or a contractor of any sort, will be affected by the loss of any revenues or any grant dollars that were allocated to a fiscal budget. And so where you would be able to call a local contractor in your county or in your city to do a job within all of our organizations, without those fundings in place, those small businesses, those plumbers, those electricians, those carpenters, those woodworkers, those welders, whoever has gotten contracts from federal dollars will suffer because they won't be able to pull from those resources. So if that happens, the new fiscal budget sets in October 2025,
and a new fiscal cycle starts, those people who had put into their budgets and forecasted a certain amount that they'll be able to pull on from other entities won't be able to get it. So if everything stays the same. So there will be more than just the clients that suffer. The business community is going to see a major loss.
Thank you. That's a very poignant point. I'm walking around, you know I'm coming. Because I need to hear from Bishop. Because I think the question, as we brought up all of these different things, I think the question begs itself, where do we go from here? What do we, how do we move forward? Because, he's going to be in office. He's not going nowhere. And he's not done doing what he's already done within the first 100 days. This is just the first 100. Yeah, it's 40 years. Where do we head to? What do we do, Bishop? Let me know something.
Sorry, that's it. Okay, that's it. I would like to start my comment by talking about something that is not a tangible loss. You can't calculate it with dollars. You can't calculate it with the numbers of individuals who have lost their job or economic development that's changed. One of the greatest impacts that I have seen in this first 100 days is what has happened to us as people. What's happened to our minds. What has happened to our initiative. What has happened to our engagement. This is one of, and I'm celebrating my birthday a few weeks ago. And I know I look a whole lot younger than I am. But I celebrated my 72nd birthday. I'm not going to tell how many years younger than Terry Pruitt I am, but it's only a couple of months anyway. And I've never seen this, where people are afraid to even voice their opinions. Not just because they have family and friends who may disagree with them, but they feel like they may become a target. We're in an environment where people feel that it's dangerous to even be honest about how they feel. I've never seen this. I've never seen it where people who are in leadership roles will measure their stance and their statement by who they think will hear them and what they have. I knew that tonight was going to be a decision-based conversation with regard to who participates. And I know that there are people who decided not to come because they thought that maybe the press would be here and they would not want to be seen in a discussion that seemed like it was against the administration. I know that. I also know that there are other events. I know that the city council is meeting, I know the school board, there are other events and other things going on. But I also know that some of the people who would be here, if there was no potential that they would be exposed as having an opposing opinion and be possibly subject to retaliation, they made the decision that it would be safer not to come. I thought about it myself. I know that there is a school of thought at work in this country right now that wants to eliminate every strong community-based institution and the power that they have. They want to take away the power of the influence of the local church. It's been happening for a number of years now. I can go all the way back to the Reagan administration when it became clear that the black church in local communities was a strong voice. And it was amazing the way that they did it. They said, we're going to cut federal funding and leave the service to individuals in trouble in the hands of those who can serve them best, community-based organizations and churches. without any funding, without any resources. And then they came back a couple of years later and said, you see, those people that you counted on aren't doing you any good. And all of a sudden, people began questioning whether or not that institution that they counted on. The people who, we have the president of our local NAACP, one of the most powerful entities in the world to represent the advancement of colored people and African Americans in the world. It's a model of local community, of organizations for people who are in need of support. The efforts to diminish the value and strength of the NAACP and other organizations like that, it's unbelievable. And now, on top of that, in addition to trying to eliminate the value and strength of it as an institution, there's retaliation and the threat that if you get federal funding and you say something bad about us, we're taking your money. That's why colleges make immediately DEI decisions without even evaluating what they're going to do because of the threat. We have never, in my lifetime, lived in an environment where the threat of telling the truth would make you retire. If you think about that on a large level, University of Michigan, Stanford, Harvard, these major institutions who were cowered because of the threat, and so much is being done. I personally know that if this is the extreme, that there are people who know that we're talking about the first 100 days, who are monitoring everything that's being said to see if there's an available target so they can make an example. I listened today, and I know this may not be a complaint, but I was listening to an urban talk show. I hope anybody that has Sirius Radio, we should listen to Urban View. And on there, they were talking about today being the 100th anniversary of the birth of Malcolm X, and all the things that were generated by it. And one person said that there has never been a time more important for people to do what they have to do, even when they're afraid, because the voice is necessary. I thought about this. I wanted to ask somebody to do this for me. If you can do this, write some names down. Write down the name C.T. Vivian, because I want you to Google it. C.T. Vivian. Write the name of Williams Weatherby. Write the name of James Clyburn, John Conyers, Coleman Alexander Young, Reverend Milton Henry, Clyde Young, Harry F. Brown, Reuben Daniels. Now, historically, when you Google those names, you'll find that these are names of great luminaries who have been great voices and done great things in the community. And for you, it would be an historic point that you would say, wow, that was really something. When I say those names, I'm talking about people that I sat across from the table, like I'm sitting next to Brother Smith. People that I had one-on-one conversations who spoke in my life. Here's another thing that's been challenged in this first 100 days. There are so many people that have lost the value of senior vision, the value of people who've done it before. One of the persons that, and I'll say this because it leads to your question. One of the persons I was listening to today was the daughter of Reverend Albert Cleage, who founded the Shrine of the Black Madonna in Detroit. I had an opportunity to meet the second pastor of the Shrine of the Black Madonna when I was working in the city of Detroit. And I found out that their movement was based on not integration and not separation, but independence, to establish a credential of economic and social independence for the community. And one of the things that she said, is stuck in my mind. She said,
I remember my father bringing all of these people in the house, and we met them and we spoke with them. They're all dead. Every one of them is gone. And now that's us, and we don't have any of them of their kind for us to sit with and bring our children to. So here's what's important. The African American community has a history of resilience. Impoverished people in the indigenous community, the indigenous people in this country have a history of resilience. People who came to this country from other countries in their own group, their neighborhoods, their ethnicity. They may not have called themselves minority community, but they were. When the Italians came, they were minority. When the Irish came, they were minority. When the Polish came, they were minority. And they have, this country has survived because there has always been a history of resilience. And the reason is because there were people who decided that they were not going to quit, that they were not going to succumb to it. Reverend Clay's daughter said in this interview, there has always been a need for leadership. One of the most distressing things that she said, one of the most distressing things that she witnessed was one of the first Black Lives Matter marches that happened in one of the cities that she was in, and they marched downtown and they tried to get to the city hall. They got there, they walked around City Hall, and nobody spoke. So they left there, they went to the Black History Museum, and they walked around there, and they marched and they spoke, and nobody gave a speech. Then they went to the governor's house, they marched around, and nobody gave a speech, and pretty soon they just dispersed, because there was nobody who took the leadership. And another devastating thing about this season that we're in is that the threat and the challenge has caused people who could lead and who would lead to be afraid to be the target, because leadership is dangerous. And so in this day, the great challenge that I will put forth, if we're going to make it through this, we are not going to be able to change Washington, D.C. We're not going to be able to go down to get a march and go down to Washington, D.C. and change the administration, because you have to understand that what's happening in Washington and in this country now didn't happen overnight. The first 100 days is a representation of 4 years of planning to do just this. You need to know something. Everybody in this room needs to know. If people tell you that our communities didn't vote, it's not true. The total country had a total voter turnout of 64%. The winner won less than half of the total voter population in the country. 31% is what won the election, or 32%. I don't tell you, was it 32, 34%, something like that. Which began to look at it, the second place came in just under 30-something%. And that's less than half of the total voter population. I found this out. The 6 battleground states had an agenda to raise votes in those 6 battleground states based on the fact that if they won there, and that was where they had the greatest new voter turnout on the other side, because our side turned out to vote. So don't say we lost the election. And I don't want you to say the election was rigged. I just want you to know that if we stood together then, we need to just get more of us to stand together and do the right thing over the next 100 days. I would suggest, Brother Jeff, that we start in this room. First, and let me say this one thing, and I'm going to quit. Do not be dismayed by the number of people in this room. Okay? The number that's here does not represent the level of interest in what we're talking about. There are more people interested in this than we see here tonight. But this room could be the very genesis of what needs to happen to go to the next place, because every one of you has a circle of influence. You
Now pick out one thing. Just pick out one thing that you've decided, I'm not going to let that happen. If it's the CAC, that's the one thing you've decided. And everybody that wants to support CAC, let's find out what Mr. Coleman needs, and let's make sure that whenever the time comes, we can write letters. If it's making sure that the education department is not, if that's the one thing, because sooner or later, like everything else, somebody's going to have to be a leader. And some of the best leaders are people who follow first. So if you're not in charge, if you're not the person giving the speech, make sure you're in the audience, clapping your hands, and giving testimony. I decided that even at 72, if I got to be one of those that stand on the front line, that I'm going to do it. Because somebody is going to be behind me. And they got to know how to do it out there.
Thank you, Bishop. And I'm going to be one of the people behind you. Always. Wow. It's always hard to follow Bishop. But man, wow, I wanted to hear from Terry as well. Terry is the president of the Sacramento chapter of the NAACP. I wanted to ask you, just to kind of, give us your thoughts on what we're seeing in these first 7 days. What do you think we stand to see going forward, and how do you think we should move forward?
Thanks, Jeff. For those of you in the room who care about anybody's age, I do have about 5 years on the bishop because I'm 77. So if you need some hair. And I know I don't look 77. Just a couple quick points, man. In fact, at 7:30, I'm going to be on a call with our national legal leadership. And you need to know that there are organizations who are trying to fight this battle. The NAACP right now is probably party to more than 24 lawsuits. Several of those we've initiated, and others we joined, other groups from across the country, against the executive orders and some of the other decisions that are being made in Washington at this time. And so there's going to be a long, drawn-out legal battle around a number of these decisions that are impacting funding and the status of certain organizations in our community. And you need to stay abreast of that. So there's a couple things I want to share with you real quick. We talk about these executive orders and decisions, but most of us really don't have a lot of knowledge about what they are. Many of them are very broadly written, and what's being discovered when the arguments are being presented in court is that they're indefensible because they are so long. And so there's going to be some legal minds that rip some of this stuff apart. The struggle is that by the time you get a court decision in many instances, they experience, the knowledge is going out the door. And that may be at the end of the day what the real goal and objective is, because if you dismantle it from the inside, then you've got a tough time going ahead, and so you start putting in things to supplement and to carry out your agenda. A couple things. If you don't have a lot of knowledge about, there are a number of websites out there, and I'm going to give you one. If you want to write this down, it's one that we reference all the time. It's hklaw.com. This is a major Washington-based legal firm that is doing tracking of all of these executive orders. Now, it lists them by date. It has an executive summary of what the executive order's intent is, but you can click on the title of it and it'll give you the full verbiage. And as you start to read through some of this, the the question pops in your head, well, what is he really trying to do? Because it really is unclear in some instances what they're trying to accomplish. Bishop, you made a couple comments, but we go back a year, almost to July of last year, the National NAACP passed a resolution, which represents primarily our talking around points around civil rights and the whole DEI issue. I've shared it with all of our members and membership, and that sort of thing. I will post it on our Facebook page this evening so you can read that. Because I think it will help some of you as you start to talk about writing letters and framing your comments, public comments or private comments around these issues. It will be, I think, a good tool for you to use in terms of how to say it and where we're coming from as a community. The final point is this. I'm a little dismayed with all of the fear and the paranoia. Some of us, I think, have to be the ones that say, listen, it's not enough. But there's no way that we, as a people and as a community and as a country, need to talk about fear. So moving ahead, one of the mistakes I think we make all too often is we talk about only communicating with our representatives. Believe it or not, Senator Slotkin and Representative Rivera are on our side of a lot of these issues. It's the people who are voting against them and supporting the executive that need to hear from people who are not their constituents, but they need to understand that every decision they're making not only impacts their community, but it impacts the nation. And so a lot of this, we need to have our voices heard. So one of the steps, Jeff, that I think needs to be taken is those of us who know how to compose the letters and know where to send them to, we need to be a part of a team of people who help you put those letters together and make sure they get to the right people. I'm a former lobbyist, so I understand the legislative process. A lot of the stuff starts at the committee level, and then it has to go to appropriations and all this other stuff. And if you're not touching the heads of those committees and the people who are actually making the decisions at those subcommittee and low-level positions in Congress, they're the ones that can be impacted very, to a larger extent. So when you look at the Department of Education funding and the Senate side and the congressional side, there's an education committee, and all of this is being debated there. And it's 15 to 20 people making the decision for Congress. And by the time it gets to Congress, most of those folks haven't even read the bill, the legislation, or anything else. They just vote because the party leadership tells them to do it. So those are the kind of people we need to be impacting. So I'm going to encourage us to broaden the communication base with the decision makers. We can start at a local level, but ultimately, these are congressional decisions at this point. And those are the people who need to hear from us. It's not just the people who represent. Am I saying don't send a letter to Senator Slotkin or Gary Peters? No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying we've got to broaden the base.
I love that, and it gives us a direction to go, because we do need to find our way forward. I do agree that we don't need to operate in fear. We operate in reality, but not fear. And the reality is that we have to fight it. We can't just fall to the wayside and without calling out specific people. I will say that the call for people to kind of lay down and hope that it goes away was something that I didn't like to hear. I did like to hear that. And, whoever made that decision to make that national call, I rebuke that. We don't lay down. We never lay down. And I hope that in this conversation that, as much peril as we've we've seen and that we've been in, that we see a way forward. And I think that way forward is together. I think that way forward is community. I think that way forward is collective impact. Some of what Terry just talked about. Some of us can get together and start to write those letters and send them not only to the senator or the representative you know, but send them to as many as you can get them out to. And that's a challenge that I'm going to take on. I hope that you will take that challenge on with me, because I think if we do this together, we can move forward together. Did we miss any part of what we need to do, or what we've not given voice to? Yes.
Hello everyone, my name is Carolyn Watkins, and I will definitely be putting a target on my back by saying this, but one thing that I do agree with Bishop, and I'm sorry for mentioning, is that this is a playbook. We've all seen this before. This isn't the first time this has happened. This is the last. He gave us a book and said, this is what I'm going to do, and this is what's going to happen. And pardon me, I'm trying to contain my, call it youth rage, if you so, but there comes a certain point in time where I feel that we have to take matters into our own hands. And by this, I'm saying we have to break rules. So although the government is important and following these rules can, be safe, but if we want to, I feel, this is just my opinion, make actual change, we're gonna have to break some rules. We're gonna have to fight back in a more important way. And I've already kind of started on this. If anyone is interested, I'm actually doing an event this Saturday, sharing local and small businesses, organizations, things like homesteading, how to grow your own food, how to take care of yourself in cases of emergency, because let's be real, it's happening now, not later. Anything could happen at any point in time, and I want Staten Island to be ready for that, so I just want to bring that to light that eventually we have to break rules, which people can be scared of. Like you said, operating in fear, we shouldn't be operating in fear. The one thing that people forget is that we are bigger than them. Just Staten Island alone, the amount of good we can do and produce, the amount that the nation could do and produce is amazing, but people are too scared to get back together. But what's that saying? We are bigger than one, like, I can't remember the saying, I'm sorry, but it's like, once they realize that we know that the people together can do what needs to be done, is when they start sending in, sorry to say, like the military. And I don't want to fear monger, but just like a week ago, I saw military grade equipment, trucks lined down the street. I'm like, is no one seeing this? So I feel that as a community, like immediately, you need to start taking action. Start figuring out how growing your own plants and stuff. Like, break the rules that they don't want you to break. Because if we don't, we won't get anywhere, I feel. But that's just my opinion on all of it.
Thank you so much for that. I do think, again, that's community. That's us taking matters into our own hands and controlling the things that we can control. And those are things that we probably should have done before now, which is the lesson in a lot of this. A lot of this, we didn't believe that some of this stuff would happen. Some of us thought that it was just kind of folklore, like, oh, he's just talking crazy. He ain't gonna really do that stuff. Well, we're here now. We're here now, and so I think just like anything in life, we take, we don't lose, we learn. And so we're in a stage of learning now. I hope that we remember this when we get on the other side of it. Because far too often, we struggle through an administration and then we change over and we get to a so-called good place and we forget this. And we forget to collectively organize so that we stay on the good side of this. And I hope that we're learning these lessons along the way. As we struggle, as these agencies like this great facility here are losing funding, when he's able to get his funding back, I hope that we remember him and support him in the good time. And and do what we have to do to maintain what he has here and even grow it. So that if we do get another rough patch, we can actually make it through it because we built up a storehouse. We saw it coming, but we had a storehouse built up so that we could withstand it. It's like withstanding a storm. You know, you build things to withstand the storm. And so, does anybody else have anything that they wanted to say about this topic, about the current administration, what we do, how do we go forward? Doesn't matter if you've spoken before, you can speak again if you want. We don't have those type of rules here. Yeah, I'm throwing shit.
I'll pass it. I have some flyers here too. I lost my train of thought, but if anyone is interested, regardless of your organization, if you know small businesses, because it's important to start building that community now. I don't want people to think that we need to wait for a month or two. No, it's now. We take the action now, because if we don't do it now, it'll be too later in the day, and we'll say that thing we've always said is, oh, it'll never happen again, or we won't let this happen again, or where were we when this was happening? You were here, you just decided not to come. So, if you have any organization, because my plan is to get people to go out and volunteer and help and share, please come let me know if you know anyone with a small business. Regardless of how small or big, please let me know so we can start getting this community built. I do plan to hold more soon. More community events, to keep the community together. Because along with the fear and getting our actions together, it's important that we stay hopeful, that we continue to have that hope and that happiness, because morale and mental will go down. Because I was going to say this really earlier, but as a youth, I'm 19, coming into adulthood like this is, I'm sorry to say, it's sickening. I don't want to have to work 70, 80 years of my life just to get 20 to, I don't even want to work to Justice in general is really heartbreaking. So my plan is to keep, the hope in our community, trying to keep people happy and realize we only have one life, and I will not spend my life working 70, 80 years, in a government that does not care for me. I feel like that's one thing people are always scared to say, but the government right now is not working for us, and that's why I was scared to say this, because it will put a target on my back. But everyone in this room, everyone listening, watching, they're not serving us. If they were, we wouldn't be in this predicament. So if you have any organizations, small businesses, or you're interested, please come visit me before you leave. I have my flyers with me. And then I'm done.
Thank you so much.
I really want to thank you for speaking out. It is just amazing to hear from you the things that you were talking about, because I can resonate with you when you talk about working. I was just in a meeting at work in regards to 401k and retirement, and listening to them telling me, like, you have enough money come out, if you take it out at 55, you have the opportunity to retire at 55, and I've been working since I was 17 years old. I don't even see you retiring at 65, let alone 55. So, it's just amazing that you are thinking on that level. And to bring that up, I want you guys to also think about, I don't know if she's still sitting over there, I can't see her cool. I do see Calhoun over there, and she is the CEO of a program that has been long-standing in Saginaw. And I know that it has been because I'm 50 years old now, and at the age of 17, that program molded me in many ways. Because Saginaw County Youth Protection Coalition, its entities are Teen Parent, the Interlink, and Youth Protection Services, meaning they educate our youth on drug abuse and things like that. Being able to allow our students to stay in school when the schools are trying to expel them for, I'm not going to say necessarily minor things, but things that I feel that they should not lose out on education, because they were not educated on those things. Teen Parent allowed me to get out on my own at the age of 18 with a child. They were able to give me affordable housing, teaching me how to get out there in the world and manage through the things that have come upon me at such a young age. You know what I mean? my adulthood, you know, and being able to be that positivity that they were for me as a teen. Just having these programs and being able to keep funding for these programs is crucial for me. And again, I absolutely agree that we should live in fear, but as you said, Jeff, it is a reality that these things are happening. Affordable housing, that was long before he even made it back into office. We see the rise of just rent prices are ridiculous. The amount of rent doesn't even equal to a young person's income. So how are they able to get out there and manage to be able to afford housing when they don't even match, it doesn't even match their income? You know, so that is something that I do think we need to keep on the forefront and understand that we can't lose out on funding like that, you know. So again, I do appreciate you for coming out. I love to see our young people in forums like this because you guys are who we need to speak out. You are our future leaders, you know, and when we have leaders such as yourself, it gives us hope that we are bringing about a change to this community. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Does anybody else have any comments? Hello? How do we move forward? Bishop?
I just want to remind everyone that the reason we're having this conversation today is because last year there was an election. And in a few weeks, there's going to be the beginning of another election. We've got city elections coming up, we've got congressional elections coming up. There's going to be local, organizational, Board of Education, city council elections. There's going to be a gubernatorial election next year. And Saginaw, whether anybody wants to admit it or not, is still one of the critical areas when it comes to determining who wins in office. The city of Saginaw County will always be considered when people start running for statewide and even national offices. And so all the talk that we do amongst each other is one thing. What's going to be important is how we influence and how we impress those people who want to be our next governor, who want to be our next mayor, who want to be our next congressional representative. And that's going to mean that we're going to have to stand up and say something. So I'm hoping that, like tonight, I do know that there's a candidate running for governor in town tonight. There's a city council meeting. I mean, there's a lot of other things going on. I want us to make sure that we don't forget that the reason we're having this conversation is because there was an election. We can't affect what happened, but we can affect what will happen.
Hi, I just want to piggyback off of what Pastor Coleman just said. I used to work for a government entity, local government entity, and I also used to work the polls. And I think in reference to the elections that he just referenced, it's important to tell your neighbors, your co-workers, your friends, your family that we need their vote. And that's because when I worked for the local government entity, the rural areas is where they win. They will come out in masses in the rural areas. There's a lot of people, let's say Chesapeake County or Swan Creek or, I'm just trying to think of some of the rural areas, but I noticed the first time when the current administration he run office, there were so many people that came in that had never voted, registered to vote against their livelihood. And I'm sure, although I wasn't working the polls or anything last year, it was the same thing. They came out in masses to vote, although it may be against their detriment or to their own detriment. But when, and my daughter and I have had this conversation, but I'm not, no, yes you are. Sometimes we might have to bend their arm, force them. But it's important that we have these conversations. I don't know, we don't talk politics at work, we don't talk religion at work, but the day and time that we live in, you have to talk politics at work. Not to the point where you're throwing clothes, but you have to have these conversations because they need to understand why it's important that they vote because they think it doesn't affect them, but it might affect your grandmother who has Medicaid and Medicaid. It might affect your aunt or your parents that depend on some of these, the funding that we receive from our government. So just have the conversation with them, vote, 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 because they vote.
I would like to let everyone know I did so.
She said she does work, so take care of that. But yeah, thank you, Bishop, for bringing that to light. What we're dealing with now is based on politics. It's based on, an election. An election happened, and as they say, elections have consequences. This election had consequences, and now we're dealing with those. But we're going to move forward together, and we're gonna fight through this. I'm confident that we're going to do that, and I want to let you know, shameless plug, SaggernowCap.org. We're going to fight. If you follow us, we're going to lead you where you need to go. We're gonna really, really fight and keep our nose in Lansing, keep our nose in DC, because just like you said, there can't be a no politics zone in our community anymore. Yeah, Trump did win Saginaw County, so by the slimmest of margins, but still, a win is a win. And so, here we are. Sure, you have a question?
And it's actually for Bishop, if you don't mind, or even, I don't know where you went. Where do I find that information about zoning? So one of the things I'm hoping to share, or if anyone knows the topic, is how do you educate people on that? Because a lot of people aren't. Like, how do I find when elections are being held, when people need to go out and vote, what they're voting on?
Actually, on the 28th of June, Saturday, the last Saturday in June, at the Royal Dartmouth campus, the Moses organization will be having an actual training on all the elections coming up, and all types of voter information on the 28th. We'll be sharing that flyer with you very, very soon.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. If there's no other comments, I want to thank you all and be respectful of your time when we close now. But thank you so much. Give yourselves a hand for coming out and having a great conversation. Before we close, Early, you got something?
Yes. Thank you, everybody, for coming. A part of the grant initiative that we have a grant that we are running right now that is really awesome because it allows us to be able to give food vouchers to people in the community. So everybody that came today, if you signed the CAP sign-in sheet, that was a CAP community event sign-in sheet, it has your phone number and email address. We will be sending you a $100 food voucher that you can use for your liking that promotes healthy foods initiative. So we'll be reaching out to you to get that to you within hopefully the next 5 to 7 business days. So thank you.
Man, you're on the bottom of the bar. That's the power of your Saginaw CAC right there. They do so much for this community, and that can't be underestimated. Man, just closing out, y'all. Thank y'all so much for coming, and we'll be in touch.